Welcome. These will be my thoughts on The Flash, Season 1, Episode 2. Fastest Man Alive. He's a red streak instead of a blue one. The episode is rated TV PG, so this video there will be spoilers for the Arrowverse leading up to and including this episode, not for anything that came out after it, and another episode that I absolutely loved. This was a very strong follow-up to an already really great season opener, really helping solidify, we've got some great stuff with Barry and Joe, this thing of the classic stepfather, what's that thing? Stepdad, dad who stepped up, something like that, and the younger finding it frustrating that someone who isn't their father is telling them what to do, and the way that the Iris Barry relationship is, we have this thing of she knows he's lying about something, but she can't quite figure out what, and she really wants, by the end of the episode, really wants to find the Flash. That's something she's actually interested in, unlike the science things that were, where she needed his help earlier. And the team dynamic, I guess, nobody's called it that on the show so far, but I feel like Team Flash makes sense. Cisco kind of just jumps into, he really loves being the guy in the chair. Caitlin is very much team, let's not say we did. And, ultimately the guy in charge there is also reluctant to let this, And we also do that thing that is important to do early in superhero stories of, because the first episode, it has to accomplish a lot, so it doesn't really have time to have this thing of, the limitations of his powers and the sort of consequences, because, Leah, it makes perfect sense. And I believe it is also from the comic, but it's been so long since I read. But this thing of his metabolism, if he uses his Flash powers, he pretty quickly wears himself out. And I think those are the overarching. So let's get into the... I'm glad they're still keeping... I wasn't sure if they were gonna, but so far they are sticking with at least some narration. In the first episode, some of it was him talking to Oliver. I think at least some of it was him talking to Henry. And I liked how meta it was with, you already know that I'm the Flash. And the, let's see. The thing about how, he actually... it used to be that he couldn't make anything on time. Now he might struggle a little focusing. He missed the by, what did he say, by 6 blocks the place that the fire actually is, which that's the kind of thing he's gonna want to be very careful with. That could mean the difference between life or death. And it's, of course, also, when something that dramatic happens to you, there's going to be an adjustment period. You're not immediately just going to be 100%. And the, let's see. They make sure to establish the actual, firefighters simply will not get there in time. Not to save everyone, at least. And Caitlin being very, very frustrated that were you just talking to Barry? Barry who? You know what, Cisco? I don't think Barry is the only person that Joe needs to tell to make up better lies. And then she hears his voice over it, over the the thing, and then she tells him, you know, this is not okay. And yeah, genuinely really great seeing him save people from a burning building. That's of course also a classic, you know, superhero kind of thing, you know, saving someone from a burning building, getting a cat out of a tree, that sort of thing. Just the kind of thing where like everyone can say, okay, I'm glad they did that. That's just a nice thing to do, you know. And I guess that does pretty well get us to the I think that's when he talks to it, right. We see his first, you know, dizzy spell. And let's see, yeah, the you know, Caitlin, I thought they did a really great job with her conflict this episode, because it's the kind of thing where you really want to be careful not to have, you know, a female character come across as like just ruining the fun or being really loud and abrasive and that sort of thing. Like when you actually, like, she is making sense, you know, she is being reasonable, she's just also passionate about it, which is fair enough. Like, this is life or death, you know. And the yeah, you know, Joe calls, and you know, he doesn't just say get here now, he says, you know, I have the police tape, I have the other officers here, guess what I'm missing? And yeah, Barry flashes out of there, and you know, there's that line about, when do you think he's going to realize he forgot his clothes? And he has to go get new ones from the shop, and he's so fast he forgets to remove the tag. That was a good sight gag, because it also, like, to the other, you know, cop, it looks like he's slow because, you know, the reason why he was late was that he was out shopping for clothes. Like, that's an unfortunate idea for him to have in his head. And yeah, you know, the camera only shows one person, but he notes there's footprints from 6. And I will admit, as soon as I heard that, I was hoping, and yeah, that is indeed, we got cloning. I love how comic booky, like, it's not even that far into the Arrowverse, but we already have something so utterly. They even have the thing about how, like, looking at his cells, they're stem cells. It just, yeah, his body was fused with stem cells or something, like, just, yeah, amazing. And yeah, the thing about, like, oh, it's the same shoe size as you. I mean, I'm not saying you're a suspect. And let's see, then we have the I think that's when he goes home to check the sample, and I, like, you know, he can't quite get the machine to work, so he just uses his powers instead. And Iris confronts him about, you know, let's see, that's the point in the episode where it's just that he isn't ready yet, because they're going to Stag. Yeah. And yeah, we get a scene of him imagining, you know, he wishes he could tell her, so he, you know, yeah, super speeds around. And let's see, I think that does bring us to the yeah, they go to the party, and you know, he is trying to explain it to her, and then ultimately, you know, it doesn't. Yeah, she tries to get a quote and then just says she'll make one up. So, I mean, she says she's studying journalism. Maybe she's trying to be part of the right-wing, quote-unquote journalist sphere, you know. making up a quote. That really does work wonderfully with, I mean, take your pick. Fox News, Newsmax. Yeah. And, yeah, Danton shows up as multiple and tries to shoot, but the Flash is able to save the guard, and that is, like, as Joe points out later, he's faster than a speeding bullet, but he's not bulletproof. And in this episode, he does end up, like, they almost take him out, when he's overwhelmed and beaten by a bunch of them. So that is a thing, and that's also something that makes him a little more interesting. And to be clear, I'm not saying that someone like Superman isn't also interesting. He has other weaknesses, but yeah, Barry is finally in a position where he can do good, which is something he's wanted to since he was a kid. Back then he could only do so much, and it's difficult for him to not jump into it, without really thinking. And let's see, I guess that does bring us to, so yeah, Joe talks to him, and yeah, the thing about, like, he immediately can tell, okay, this, Barry flashed out again, obviously. And yeah, I thought the flashbacks worked well. This thing of, yeah, the "you're not my dad" thing, and Barry just wants to see Henry, and Henry is trying to keep him away because he doesn't want him to see him like that. And he says, "You can't help me," which is, of course, meant as, like, you have to focus on your own life. Please don't throw everything away for me. But to a child, it's, yeah, he's obviously still upset by having, all those years where he could not do anything for his father. And so that's part of why, now that he can make a change, he's really struggling to just, accept any kind of limitation. And I think that is when they find out that he faints sometimes. And yeah, I quite appreciated the, yeah, again, Kate being the voice of reason. And let's see. Yeah, I like the little bit of, stuff that has to be translated. She says something that I don't even remember the exact words, and then, the guy in charge is like, mini stroke. Probably unlikely. And yeah, they already have him on a treadmill. I remember something like that from the comic. And yeah, the treadmill has been Cisco'd so that it can keep up with him, and yeah, he passes out, and they realize, it's the glucose levels. And I did like that until the end of the episode, several times we see him, well, I guess maybe it is just the one, but we see him with a bunch of, no, coffee shop with Iris, and also the bit where he's got, like, a bunch of boxes of donuts, which, like, yeah, if you're gonna eat, I think there was like 4 boxes. Don't they come in, like, boxes of 6? I don't, I don't even know if around here in Denmark they sell them like that, but I feel like I've heard, maybe from Dexter, there were a lot of donuts on that show. But yeah, it's certainly, that's a lot. That's a huge amount of calories, but with a system like that. And yeah, love the visual shorthand. We just see, the empty boxes of donuts, and at the coffee shop we see, Jitter, I think it's called. We see the, the plates with a little bit of leftover. It's not necessary to show him actually eating all this. And I guess that does bring us to the Yeah, I think that is around the time of the bodyguard, being killed by that, and that was, yeah, genuinely very clever. He's like, "Where's your army?" It's just me, and then later, it's like a minute or two later, they do attack, and yeah, the let's see. Yeah, they did do a really good job on the reveal. We see Dalton Danson's face fairly early, but we don't see the unmasked, until I think it is when they attack the security guy. And let's see. I think that might bring us to the yeah, and we have the classic thing of, from comic book media of, the character having to choose between their lives. Is he the Flash, who runs around as a red streak saving people, or at least attempts to, mostly succeeds, or is he Barry Allen, CSI, friend of Iris? And I think that might be when they talk about, so yeah, Joe go to the go to talk to Simon because of the, you know yeah, it's pretty clear that he's the target. And yeah, there's that point made, like, I forget if it was Sadler's character or someone else, but one of them is like, who would want to kill a philanthropist? I mean, I'm guessing someone who hasn't watched Shawshank Redemption. That's a significant chance. The odds are pretty good. Maybe someone who thinks that Sadler really is his character from Kinsey in real life. And yeah, in case we needed more of an indication that Stagg is a bad guy, he makes an ableist remark towards, yeah, wow. I am not going to repeat it, but I do think that it's one of those things where if you're going to have ableism, it should be this sort of thing where it's like, see, this is what evil people do. This is an awful thing to do to another human being. Do not be ableist. Do you want to be this guy? And I think that is when Barry encounters the multiple. Yeah, right. Cause yeah, yeah, Danson attacks, and Flash has to go there. Joe is there. And that was also great. I appreciate that 2 episodes in a row, Joe tells one of his either biological or adopted children, you are not a cop, so don't act like one, which is also the kind of thing I have heard, like, to be clear, a cab, but I do appreciate there are a number of cops who really don't want that for their own offspring, for their loved ones. And yeah, the the part where Barry says, go, and Joe's like, no, and then he comes to and he's right outside, and it's like, wasn't a question. And yeah, I quite appreciated that Joe did see the cloning, the self-cloning, which is very convenient. He can send himself for pizza. And I think yeah, it's also just a really cool idea. So according to IMDb trivia, originally multiplex, so I guess Cisco got it right. It only took him 2 tries. Is not originally a Flash villain, but it is the kind of villain that makes a ton of sense, because that's the thing, the especially there at the climax where he is fighting like dozens, maybe 100 clones. You know, that's the kind of thing you can only really do. You know, I know we're only 2 episodes in, and I may have even said it in the video in the first one, but I do really continue to appreciate the way, that was months ago. I do really continue to appreciate the way that they are making sure that Flash, at least so far, goes up against enemies that, like, the entirety of Team Arrow, like, even with, like, the League of Assassins and, they could bring Argus, like, every single person that they could bring in would not be able to resolve the situation as Barry can. I appreciate Argus would probably blow up the building there at the end, but then, that would not save Staggs so that he can be killed by the guy in charge of the particle accelerator lab. Anyway, let's see. I guess that does pretty much bring us to the, yeah, I like the thing about, why is my dad mad at you? Why are you mad at me? And I like that Cisco is annoyed that Barry got blood on the suit. And it at first seems like just a throwaway line. He just says, some lads, dancins. And then later we find out, oh yeah, the Kate cloned a dancin from the blood, because that is also like, it's already a scientist kind of reaction to that, but it's especially that of a comic book scientist, like Barry, you cannot throw something like that out there and not expect her to make a clone. You're lucky that there wasn't an army of them when you got there, And that's also a very effective trick they pulled there with, she calls and she's like, you have to get there now. And then the camera shows, oh, dancing. And we, of course, think. And then Barry shows up and it's like, oh, no, it's an inert clone. Sorry, should I have sounded less urgent on the phone? But at the same time, it's also like, yeah, this is the solution, though. They know how this, yeah. And, yeah, I really like that thing about, you should know, in science we share, or you do know. And, yeah, appreciate any anti-individualist, objectivist message in media, especially American media, for a mainstream audience, which, by 2014, comic book media was fairly mainstream. We'll appreciate that it wasn't always. And I guess that does... Yeah, and the thing about how, most of the time, if they're not being sent orders, the clones are just inert. But then it does attack, and, Joe shows up, guns it down, and yeah, the others find out, oh, Barry didn't tell Joe about the working together. And I like Kate being like, what? I'm agreeing with you. And I think that pretty much... I did like Iris as a child lying for Barry as a child, Where's Barry? Taking a shower at 3 in the afternoon. If I go up there, am I going to find Barry? Or are you going to be grounded for lying to me? And, yeah, okay, he's not here, but don't worry, Dad. I know where he is. Yeah, so do I. And I think that more or less brings us to the finale. Let's see, is there anything else I want to make sure to say? No, yeah, that, yeah. And, the thing about how, Stag says something like, oh, I hope he attacks because I'm ready for him. And then, Particle Lab guy points out, spoken like a true philanthropist. That is still what you're, pretending to be, right? And, yeah, I think that does... Yeah, so they of course do, there's... The security people are no match for Danton. And it was genuinely very effective tension and suspense during, because like every so often Barry does have to hide. He can't just run around constantly and attacking them. There's just too many of them. If just one of them hits him with a bullet, that's it. Like, even if it's not a kill shot, it might... Didn't mean to make that reference. It would still slow him down enough that they could finish him off. So, yeah. I think that does bring us to the... yeah, and I really appreciate how different it is from the, the climax of the first episode, which was also very, very different superpower. Tension and suspense, that does, that is the kind of thing there's a lot of on Arrow. But yeah, there's enough of a distinction that it doesn't feel like just doing that again. I think that does bring us to... Yeah, it was so freaking cool when, Danton plays the trump card and just sends out so many. Yeah. And, we get the pep talk thing. And I know I'm not the only person who, when we saw Iris, the conversation, and, she's like, so you're finally going to tell me the truth? And he's like, there was something I thought I had to do, but I don't. So we're doing Spider-Man 2, Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2. There's a extremely similar scene in that. I'm keeping it vague enough that that's not a spoiler. Anyway, I think... Yeah, he manages to take out the original Danton, and, at least one point he has to duck out of the way of, a projectile. So at some point off screen, he did run into Morpheus, who told him he can dodge bullets. And that he does have to. And yeah, Danton did not want to be saved. If he can't take out Stag, that's it. And I did appreciate we do get, this brief thing of, like, he is still a villain. He is an antagonist. He was, getting other people hurt. It's one thing that he wants to take Stag out. We can understand why, though not necessarily be okay with it. I certainly am not, but he's also killing these people who are literally just paid to protect someone. Like, they don't know that Stag, is so unethical. Like, clearly a lot of people don't know that. And yeah, he even uses the cloning power to make sure that Barry is not able to save his life. And I guess that does pretty much cover... I'll just very briefly note that I thought the video by the YouTube channel Pillar of Garbage on MCU-ification was very even-handed. Yeah, I think that does just about cover... Yeah, I thought it worked really well to have this sort of, one of the conflicts in this episode is whether or not Barry is going to keep being the Flash, because episode 1, that was one thing, that was one very specific situation, but you know, Joe does make a point, and I really appreciate when, I'm not saying it's always how it should be. Sometimes we should explore, there are parents out there who are abusive, and that should be called out. But that's not what they're doing here. This is one of those cases where, technically both of them have a point and the other one struggles to see it. And that is an extremely common conflict between not just father-son, but any kind of parent-offspring relationship. Joe is right that Barry is in at least a little bit over his head. But Barry is right that this is stuff that the cops cannot deal with, and it is Barry coming of age and becoming, self-actualizing versus Joe, who's known him since he was a child, since Barry was. It wouldn't really have made sense for it to be the other way around, and still worries about protecting him. And that is something, there are like parents who still struggle to accept that their offspring are all grown up, even though, I've heard cases where like the offspring will literally be middle-aged and have a career and have, their life is, they got their life together. It's all working, and their parents are still struggling to accept it. So really appreciate that being the yeah. And it's also that thing of like, if Barry is going to keep doing heroism, it's not enough for him to just jump into situations and use his powers. That would also be, they need more if it's gonna, for a TV show. You can do that kind of thing if you're just doing like a one-off movie, but yeah. I believe that pretty much covered. Right. I did think it was very interesting that, so particle accelerator guy, he says the red streak is the Flash, or will be known as that, and he must be kept safe. Interesting. I was not expecting, because that's the thing. I know we're only 2 episodes in, so I'm not saying I should know the answer, but I am genuinely excited to find out if he is a villain or just a hero who has to keep a secret, which, I mean, fair enough. So's Barry. So, yeah, very nicely done on that. I feel like there's at least one more thing. I know I already mentioned there was, it was great, the, Barry seeing that there were 6 people. I forget if I mentioned, the visual of that was also really great. And I guess that pretty much covers. Yeah, and by the end of the episode, he does have the protein bars, which I believe are also there in the comic, at least some of the comics. And it is that thing of like, that is technically like, if a villain can keep him from eating and force him into a situation where he has to use his powers, that will knock him out. That could be a real problem if a villain finds that out. So there's room for that sort of thing. And at the same time, they can have entire episodes where that never comes up, and have other conflicts in those. So they're already doing a great job laying out a tapestry. There's a lot of options. But yeah, particle accelerator guy. I promise eventually I will learn everybody's names. In my defense, I got most of them for this episode, but yeah, and yeah, my research you sort of check right now what his name is. But the let's see. You have the thing about the yeah, he kills Stag. And yeah, as soon as I saw him get out of the chair, I was thinking, okay, I'm pretty sure he's going to kill him now, because this is clearly something he's keeping secret. I am really going to miss. It would have been great if Sadler could be in my... I guess it's not impossible he'll be like flashbacked to, or some kind of... Yeah. He is one of my favorite actors of all time. So I guess that... And to be clear, I'm not just saying of like, oh, you know, like my lifetime. No. I mean like way back. Like, you know, a quick example, another name up there, Humphrey Bogart, you know, Fritz Lang. Like, I'm not just saying much more recent, much less currently living actors. And yeah, I will say, I don't know. So the following is not really a criticism, but particle accelerator guy, you know, confronting Stag, like basically, you know, like, oh, you're such a villain, like, pot calling the kettle black. You know, if my pot spoke, I don't care what it was saying, I would lay off the weed.